They called me the family hero. Not out loud, of course. It was never something anyone said to my face, not in a real way, but it was implied always. I was the one who showed up, the one who answered the late night calls, the one who sent the money, picked up the slack, stayed quiet, and kept the peace. I was Amelia Bennett, 32, single, childless, account manager at a mid-sized ad agency in downtown Chicago. And apparently the glue that held my whole family together. I lived alone in a one-bedroom apartment that smelled faintly of old wood and coffee. It wasn't much, but it was mine. A slice of independence in a city that never slowed down. From the small kitchen window, I could see just a sliver of Lake Michigan if I leaned left and squinted. That view cost me more than I like to admit. My parents lived 35 minutes away in a quiet suburb called Westfield. Classic Midwest charm. Tree-lined streets, a 2-car driveway, the same neighbors since 1992. My dad, Harold, used to run a local auto shop. My mom, Margaret, was a receptionist at a dentist's office. Both retired now, living on a fixed income, and a healthy dose of nostalgia. My older sister, Claire, was the settled one, married to her college boyfriend, Dan, 3 boys, loud and energetic, always with something sticky on their faces. They lived 10 minutes from my parents in a house that somehow always needed repairs, or new clothes, or fees for sports leagues. Claire had chosen the life everyone else seemed to admire. Husband, children, soccer practices, holiday photos. Me, I'd chosen the city, long hours, and quiet evenings with frozen meals. And yet somehow I was the one expected to give. It started small, the way these things do. $100 for groceries when my parents' pension fell short. A couple hundred for Claire when Dan's hours were cut and the rent came due. "Just this once," she said. "We'll pay you back." But they never did. At first, I didn't mind. It felt good to help, to be needed. But over time, the asks came more often. The amounts grew larger. And no one ever paused to ask if I was okay. If I had enough. If maybe I was struggling too. Because on the outside, I had it together. Steady job, no kids, no mortgage, no excuses. But what they didn't see were the sacrifices. The trips I never took, the dinners I skipped, the savings account that never seemed to grow. I was too busy being the responsible one, the dependable one, the hero. Every Sunday we had dinner at my parents' house. Pot roast, mashed potatoes, chaos in every corner. Claire's boys raced through the living room, knocking over picture frames and snack bowls. My mom moved between kitchen and table like it was still 1985. My dad nursed a beer and checked the Cubs score like clockwork. And me, I brought the wine, I set the table, I cleaned up, I listened to stories about the boys' school projects and Claire's weekend plans. I laughed at the right moments and nodded in the others. No one asked me about my week. No one noticed if I looked tired. If I said I had a deadline, they smiled like it was cute. Like work was just a phase I'd outgrow. I wasn't bitter, at least I didn't think I was. But sometimes on the drive home, I'd grip the steering wheel a little tighter. I'd wonder if anyone ever really saw me. Not the provider, not the helper, just me. Maybe they didn't. Maybe I'd been playing a part so long that I didn't know who I was without it. And maybe, just maybe, that was where everything started to go wrong. The first time Claire asked for money, it was only $200. Dan had just lost a few hours at work, and their youngest, Max, had outgrown his stroller. She called me crying, voice shaky and soft, saying they didn't have enough for a new one. "It's just a loan, Mel," she promised. "Just this once." I had a weekend trip planned with friends. Nothing fancy, just 2 nights at a cabin, some cheap wine, card games, and laughter. But I canceled. Sent the money with a quick text and told myself it was no big deal. She never brought it up again, and I never asked. That was 6 years ago. Since then, just this once had become a family mantra. The car broke down, call Amelia. Little League uniforms, Amelia's got it. Emergency dental work? Don't worry, Amelia will cover it. At first it was bearable. Small things spread out over time, but slowly it turned into something else. Bigger, constant, a pipeline of needs flowing directly to me. I didn't even wait to be asked anymore. They'd hint, sigh, drop clues, and I'd offer before they finished the sentence. I was always the solution, the financial cushion, the fixer. They made it sound like a compliment. "You're so responsible, Amelia." You've always been the strong one. You're lucky you don't have all the expenses we do. Lucky. That word stung more than I ever admitted. Yes, I didn't have 3 kids. I didn't have a mortgage. I didn't have a husband to split the bills with. But I also didn't have someone bringing me coffee in the morning, or a partner to tag team stress, or kids who would hug me after a long day. I had bills too. Rent that swallowed most of my paycheck, groceries that got more expensive every month, a boss who thought urgent was an hourly setting, and a pile of unopened mail I was too tired to deal with. But none of that mattered because I looked put together. They assumed I had more because I had less chaos, fewer mouths to feed. They never once considered that maybe, just maybe, I had less because I was always giving it to them. Every time I thought about saying no, guilt rose like smoke in my chest. What if they couldn't make rent? What if the kids missed out? What kind of daughter, sister, aunt would I be then? So I kept saying yes. I cut back on eating out. I stopped replacing clothes. I rationed vacation days to cover family emergencies. I learned to stretch my paycheck like taffy, thin, transparent, almost breaking. But the more I gave, the less they noticed. Gratitude faded. The thank yous became shorter, then disappeared. Soon, they weren't even asking, they were informing. And somewhere in all of that, I disappeared too. The thing about slow erosion is you don't notice what's missing until you're standing knee-deep in rubble, wondering how the foundation ever held. I used to think love meant sacrifice, that family meant showing up, no matter the cost. But lately, I'd started asking questions I didn't have the courage to answer. What if love shouldn't hurt? What if the people closest to you were also the ones pulling you under? And what if saying yes over and over wasn't love at all? Just fear dressed up as duty. Sunday dinners always followed the same script. I'd arrive with a cheap bottle of wine and a half smile. Claire's boys would be yelling over each other, racing around with crumbs on their shirts and chocolate on their fingers. Mom would be in the kitchen, humming some old tune and swatting everyone away from the oven. Dad sat at the table, half reading the newspaper, half watching the Cubs lose again. It was noisy, messy, predictable. And somehow it still felt like something I was obligated to show up for, like clocking in at a second job I never applied for. That particular Sunday felt no different until it was. Claire waited until dinner had settled and the kids were busy arguing over whose turn it was to pick dessert. She slid a folded paper across the table toward me, like it was nothing. I got everything organized this time, she said, as if she was handing me a grocery list. This should cover next month. I unfolded the sheet, typed, single space, aligned in neat columns. Each item had a name, a need, and a price. Basketball shoes for Ethan, $110. School trip deposit for Caleb, $180. Summer camp early registration, $350. New sneakers for Lily, $75. Gift for Caleb's friend's birthday, $30. Field trip lunches, $25. Emergency dental checkup, $160. Odds and ends, $100. And at the bottom, total $1,800. I stared at it. $1,800. My fingers tightened around the edge of the paper. I tried to school my expression, but something shifted in my chest. Not shock, not even anger, just emptiness. I know it seems like a lot, Claire said, but if we don't register for camp early, the spots go fast, and Ethan's been really excited for basketball season. I didn't answer right away. Because the truth was, I'd eaten ramen 4 nights last week just to recover from the last $500 I sent Dad when the water heater broke. My savings were thinner than tissue paper. I hadn't bought myself new shoes in over a year. And here she was, casually sliding me a bill for nearly $2,000, as if I were the family accountant. But still, the words came out the way they always did, soft, automatic. I'll take care of it. Clara beamed, relieved. You're seriously a lifesaver, Mel. I don't know what we'd do without you. I nodded, smiled, reached for my phone under the table, and took a photo of the list. And I wasn't sure why. Maybe for proof, maybe for me, but something inside me had started keeping score, even if I hated myself for it. That's when Mom noticed the phone. Her eyes narrowed. Is that the new iPhone? I froze. Yeah, my old one finally died. Her voice sharpened like a blade. How much did that cost? $1,000. I slid the phone off the table, heat creeping up my neck. I saved for it. 3 months. She clucked her tongue and set down a plate of pie in front of me. When your nephews need new shoes and you're buying fancy phones, Amelia, really? Dad didn't even look up. Those boys need all the help they can get. Can't make regionals without the right gear. I stared at the pie. My appetite disappeared. I just agreed to $1,800, and they were lecturing me over a phone I bought with my own money. I could have screamed, but instead I swallowed my pride. Again, I'll handle the list, I repeated, quieter this time. I always do, and no one questioned that, because to them I always would. Under the soft glow of Chicago streetlights, the city felt quieter than usual. It was one of those nights where I let myself feel human again. Drinks with friends, stories that made us laugh until our sides ached, a couple hours where I wasn't. I left the bar just after 10, the air crisp against my face as I walked toward my car. For once, I didn't have a mental checklist of who needed what from me next. I was just Amelia, just existing. Then, as I pulled up to the red light on Grand Avenue, something familiar caught my eye. A silver Toyota Camry, parked neatly across the street, directly in front of Les Solenes, my parents' car. At first, I thought maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe someone else had a dent in the same place, the same faded dealership sticker. But as I stared, my breath held tight in my chest. I knew it was theirs. And then I looked up. Through the tall glass windows of Les Solenes, the most expensive restaurant in downtown Chicago. I saw them, all of them. Dad in a blazer I didn't recognize, sitting upright with a glass of red wine in his hand. Mom in a black dress, a strand of pearls glinting against her skin as she laughed at something Charlotte said. Charlotte's husband beside her, nodding, smiling. And the kids, dressed up like little gentlemen, poking at some kind of intricate dessert that looked like it had been sculpted, not cooked. The table was covered in plates, lobster tails, thick cuts of steak, bottles of wine, and in the center, what looked like a chocolate cake with actual sparklers crackling from the top. They were celebrating. They were radiant. They looked rich. I couldn't move. I stood on the sidewalk stunned while behind me people passed and laughed and carried on like the world hadn't just tilted under my feet. I took out my phone and snapped a photo, not for revenge, not to share, just so I'd know later that I wasn't imagining it, that I hadn't made it up, that I hadn't misunderstood everything. The people who told me they couldn't pay for school supplies, who had said, just last week we're stretched so thin. The same people who scolded me over a phone I'd saved months for. They were in there eating like royalty. Before I even knew what I was doing, I was dialing Jessica. She answered on the second ring, her voice still bright from the evening shift. Hey, I said, my voice catching. Do you still work at Les Solenes? 5 years strong, she laughed. You finally gonna try the truffle risotto? I paused. Actually, I just drove by and saw my family inside. The Bennetts. Older couple, maybe with 3 kids. Oh, sure, the Bennetts. They're regulars. Your mom loves the creme brulee. Your dad's a ribeye guy. They're here most Fridays. Last week they had a birthday party. Sparklers and everything. Super cute. Regulars. I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. The silence in my car was unbearable. My hands trembled as I pulled up Charlotte's Instagram. There it was, a post from just a week ago. Them, at the same table, same chandelier, same cake. Family night, the caption read, blessed. Blessed. I stared at the word until it blurred. They've been lying to me, not once, not just this time, over and over for months, years maybe. I sat there, engine running, phone still in my lap, as the reality cracked something deep inside me. Like, it wasn't just the money, it wasn't even the betrayal. It was that they'd been celebrating without me, eating joyously with the dollars I'd sent in silence, clinking glasses paid for by my skipped meals, laughing in pearls while I counted change at a gas station. That was the night I stopped being the family hero. That was the night I saw the truth and I couldn't unsee it. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the edge of my bed, fully clothed, staring at the pictures I took through the restaurant window. My father raising his glass, my mother tilting her head in laughter, Charlotte cutting into that ridiculous cake while the kids grinned beside her. I zoomed in again and again just to feel the sting, as if hurting myself with proof would somehow make sense of it. By morning, the disbelief had settled into something heavier. I made coffee, but didn't drink it. My stomach turned every time I thought about that cake, those sparklers, the wine. I paced the apartment, heart pounding, breath shallow. Then I picked up my phone and called my mother. She answered on the third ring, her voice groggy. "Amelia, it's at 7 a.m. Is something wrong?" I stood at the window, the skyline behind the fogged glass. "I saw you," I said. "At Les Solines, last night." Silence. You, Dad, Charlotte, the kids, laughing over lobster, drinking wine, sparklers on a cake. I took pictures. Still, nothing, just air, thick and heavy between us. "Jessica works there, remember? She told me your regulars, Friday nights, creme brulee and ribeye, VIP card, a birthday party. Sound familiar?" Her voice came back small. "Mike got a bonus, he wanted to treat us." It was... Don't lie, I snapped. "Not this time." "Amelia, you're overreacting." I laughed, sharp and hollow. "Overreacting? I paid for Caleb's dentist bill 2 weeks ago, sent you $500 for that pipe issue in the basement. Charlotte handed me a list totaling $1,800 just 5 days ago, and I didn't blink. And you were out there last night, dressed like it was New Year's Eve, eating food I can't afford to look at." She was quiet again, and then, in the voice I knew too well, the voice of disappointed authority, she said, "We raised you better than this." "Better than what?" I asked. "Better than wanting honesty? Better than expecting some decency? You made me feel guilty for buying a phone I saved months for, and meanwhile you're popping champagne?" "It's not like that." "It is exactly like that. We're your family," she said. "We needed you." "You used me," I replied. "You still are." Then I ended the call. The phone buzzed again seconds later. Charlotte. "What did you say to Mom?" she demanded. "She's crying." I told her the truth, I said. Something no one else seems to be doing. She went quiet, then softened. "Mel, look, we've just had a lot going on. The kids need things, and sometimes a nice dinner helps us feel normal." "Normal?" I asked. "Normal is pizza on a Friday night, not filet mignon and sparklers. You knew what you were doing." "You're being unfair." "I'm being honest." "You're punishing the kids." "No, I'm letting the adults face their responsibility." She didn't answer that. And I, for once, didn't wait for her to. I ended the call, blocked her number, blocked Mom's. I sat there, hands shaking, heart still raw, but feeling something new rising in me. Space, silence, freedom. They didn't stay quiet for long. By the end of the week, the messages started rolling in. Different numbers, unrecognizable area codes, vague names. One was a blurry photo of their fridge. Nearly empty, a half carton of eggs and a lonely bottle of mustard sitting on the middle shelf. The caption read, "We're struggling again. Please." Another came from Charlot's email, a new list titled Essentials Only. This time the total was $900. I didn't open the attachment. I didn't respond. Then came a voicemail from Dad, his voice calm, rehearsed. "Amelia, this isn't how we raised you. You're better than this." Better than what, I wanted to ask. Better than saying no? Better than standing up for myself after years of silent giving? They even tried reaching me at work. My assistant poked her head into my office, awkward. "There's someone on the line claiming to be your mother." I shook my head. "Tell her I'm in a meeting." I wasn't. I just didn't want to be dragged back in. I spent that Friday night alone in my apartment. No noise, no guilt, just me, a blanket, and a quiet I hadn't felt in years. I opened my banking app. $11,000 sat in the family emergencies fund I'd created years ago. The account I kept just in case the roof caved in or the car broke down or someone needed surgery. The account I never touched for myself. I transferred it, all of it, into a new savings account. name for me. It felt radical, selfish, but also like breathing for the first time. The next day, Sarah called an old high school friend, someone I hadn't talked to in months. Hey, Amelia, so your mom asked me to check on you. She said things have been hard since you stepped back. Did she also mention the birthday party at Le Solène, the weekly dinners, the VIP card? There was a long pause. No, but she did have a new bracelet on last time I saw her. I almost laughed. She said you abandoned them, Sarah added softly, that they're falling apart without you. I didn't answer. There was nothing left to explain. Later that weekend, over wine, Tara leaned closer and lowered her voice. You know, Charlotte's drowning in credit card debt, right? What? 20 grand. Designer bags, shoes, clothes. Brian just found out. He made her start therapy. Apparently, she was using your help to keep up with the minimum payments. I felt my stomach twist. All those nights I told myself she just needed help, that it was for the kids. They've been telling people you cut them off out of spite, Tara added. Let them. Because the truth was, I didn't cut them off to punish anyone. I did it to save myself. The silence became my sanctuary. Without the constant noise of guilt and requests, I began to hear myself again. At first, it was disorienting. I kept checking my phone out of habit, expecting another just this once message or a passive-aggressive voicemail. But they stopped coming, or maybe I stopped noticing. And slowly, the silence turned into peace. I did things I hadn't done in years. I slept in on Saturdays. I walked without a destination. I cooked real meals with ingredients that didn't come from a box. I bought a secondhand car with cash, a silver Honda Civic, nothing flashy but reliable. It had a sunroof. I rolled it back on my first warm day out, letting the breeze tangle my hair as I drove with no one to answer to. I rearranged my apartment, bought throw pillows that didn't match but made me smile. I replaced the broken lamp in the corner. I hung up art. I filled a bookshelf with stories I wanted to read, not because anyone told me to, but because they called to me. 3 months in, I joined a book club. We met at a local cafe every Thursday. It wasn't just about books. It was laughter, wine, the kind of conversations that left you warm even when they ended. No one there asked me for money. They just asked me what I thought about the characters. I went hiking with a group of strangers who quickly became friends. We drove out of the city on crisp mornings, climbed dusty trails, and stood at the top of ridges where the world felt small and infinite at the same time. And yes, I dated, nothing serious, just coffee and conversations. One man asked me what I did for fun, and I realized I didn't know how to answer. Fun had been a foreign concept, buried under years of obligation. But I was starting to rediscover it, piece by piece. I created a new budget, not one that prioritized emergencies, but one that left room for joy. I opened a new savings account labeled Hawaii. I had always dreamed of going, but the dream had gathered dust in the corners of my mind. Now, it was real, a date on the calendar, a reward for choosing myself. And for the first time in my adult life, I looked at my bank balance and smiled. I wasn't waiting for the next crisis. I wasn't bracing for the next list. I was just living. My family still tried from time to time. An email here, a text from an unknown number, a voicemail that started with, "We miss you," and ended with, "The boys need new cleats." I deleted them all. Not out of anger, not even out of pain, out of self-respect. Because I finally understood love without respect is just a leash. And I had spent too many years being walked by people who claimed they couldn't live without me, while feasting behind closed doors. I was done being their backup plan. I was writing a new story, and this time I was the main character. They didn't stop trying. Every few weeks, I'd get another message from a number I didn't recognize. Sometimes it was a short text, "The boys miss you." Sometimes it was longer, more theatrical. "Jake cried himself to sleep last night asking why his aunt doesn't love him anymore." I didn't respond. Not because I didn't love them. I did. I always would. But love wasn't enough anymore. Not if it meant returning to a version of myself I'd outgrown. Once, Charlotte emailed me from a new address with the subject line, "You are gent." Inside was a familiar tone, a familiar plea. I know things got tense, but we're family. Liam doesn't understand why you disappeared. Please, don't punish the kids for our mistakes. Punish, that word echoed in my head like a warning bell. Setting boundaries wasn't punishment. It was self-preservation. They had spent so long shaping a version of me that was useful to them, the dependable one, the giver, the quiet fixer who never asked for anything in return. When that version disappeared, they didn't know how to reach the real me. And maybe they didn't want to. I saw it for what it was now, not a cry for reconciliation, but a strategy. One more attempt to reel me back in with guilt, to blur the lines between love and obligation. But I had learned the difference. Love respects space. Obligation manipulates it. My friends noticed the shift in me. Jess told me over coffee one afternoon, "You look lighter, like you're breathing with your whole body." I was. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even sad. I was free. I'd started building a life that didn't revolve around who needed me next. A life that had color and softness and breath in it. I spent Saturday mornings walking through the farmer's market. I picked out flowers just because they were beautiful. I sent postcards to myself from places I never thought I'd visit. I cooked meals that took time and tasted like care. And not once did I feel guilty for any of it, because I wasn't stealing from anyone. I was reclaiming what had always been mine. My mother still told people I'd abandoned them, that I'd changed, that I was selfish now. But I no longer felt the need to defend myself. They were right about one thing. I had changed. And for the first time, I liked the person I was becoming. I wake up to sunlight. Not the harsh kind that drags you into another day of obligations, but the soft, golden kind that slips through the curtains like an invitation. The apartment is quiet, and for once, that silence doesn't feel empty. It feels earned. I stretch. No urgent texts, no guilt-laced voicemails, just the hum of the city and the sound of my own breath. In the kitchen, I make coffee the slow way, French press. Steam curls through the air as I pour it into my favorite chipped mug. I lean against the counter, take a sip, and smile. This is my life now. Not loud, not grand, but mine. I'm not chasing approval. I'm not shrinking myself to fit inside someone else's idea of love. I'm not pouring from an empty cup just to keep the peace. I'm enough, as I am, for me. They still don't understand, and maybe they never will. That's not my burden anymore. I have peace. I have space. And finally, I have myself. Tell me, have you ever had to choose yourself over people you loved? And if you did it set you free?